Just a quick reminder that we love our American friends, and this is all in good fun. If you enjoy these stories, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. I work at a grocery store, and a Karen came through my checkout lane with a cart full of items. I started scanning, and she stopped me after the third item. She said, "Why are you going so fast?" I said, "I'm just scanning at normal speed." She said, "You're trying to confuse me so I don't notice if you scan something twice." I told her she could watch the screen. She said, "I shouldn't have to monitor you. That's your job." I slowed down dramatically, scanning one item every 10 seconds. She said, "Now you're being passive-aggressive." I asked what speed she wanted. She said, "Professional speed." I had no idea what that meant. She demanded to speak to my manager. My manager came over and asked what was wrong. She said, "Your employee doesn't know how to scan groceries." My manager watched me scan 3 items at normal speed and said I was doing fine. Karen said, "You're both incompetent," and left her full cart at the register. My friend works at a coffee shop, and a Karen ordered a medium caramel latte with skim milk. My friend made it exactly as ordered. Karen took one sip and said, "This is wrong." My friend asked what was wrong with it. Karen said, "It doesn't taste right." My friend offered to remake it. Karen said, "I want you to remake it correctly this time." My friend asked what was incorrect. Karen said, "If I have to tell you, you're not a real barista." My friend remade it identically. Karen tasted it and said, "Better." My friend asked what the difference was. Karen said, "You actually tried this time. There was no difference." Karen left a 1-star review saying the staff had bad attitudes and couldn't make coffee without being told twice. I work at a hotel front desk, and a Karen checked in and immediately complained that her room number had a 4 in it. I asked if there was a problem with the room itself. She said, "The number is unlucky." I told her that's a superstition in some Asian cultures, but not typically American. She said, "I'm spiritual. Numbers have energy." I offered to change her room. She said, "I want a room that ends in 7. I checked availability." We had one room ending in 7. I moved her. She went up and came back 10 minutes later. She said, "This room has bad energy too." I asked what was wrong. She said, "I just feel it." I asked if she wanted to go back to the first room. She said, "No, that one was worse." I offered a third room. She said, "What number?" I said 309. She said, 9 is fine. I gave her the key. She came back an hour later and checked out entirely, saying our hotel was cursed. My cousin works at a restaurant, and a Karen came in with a party of 8 without a reservation on a Saturday night. My cousin told her the wait would be about 45 minutes. Karen said, "That's unacceptable." My cousin said, "We're fully booked." Karen said, "I can see empty tables." My cousin explained those were reserved. Karen said, "Unreserved 1." My cousin said she couldn't do that. Karen said, "I'm a paying customer." My cousin said, "So are the people with reservations." Karen said, "They can wait." "We're here now." My cousin offered to put her on the wait list. Karen said, "I'm not waiting." "Seat me now." My cousin said, "I can't." Karen said, "Get your manager." The manager came out and said the same thing. Karen said, "This is discrimination." The manager asked, "Against what?" Karen said, "Against people who don't make reservations." They didn't seat her. She stood in the waiting area loudly complaining for 20 minutes before finally leaving. I work at a pharmacy, and a Karen came in to pick up a prescription. I told her it wasn't ready yet. She said, "Why not?" I checked the system. It was called in 30 minutes ago and needed insurance approval. I explained this. She said, "I need it now." I said, "I understand, but insurance takes time." She said, "Override it." I said, "I can't override insurance," she said. "Then I'll pay cash." I told her the cash price. She said, "That's robbery." I said, "That's why we're waiting for insurance." She said, "This is your fault." I asked how. She said, "You should have processed it faster." I told her we process prescriptions in the order they're received. She said, "I don't care about other people's prescriptions." I told her it would be ready in an hour. She said, "I'll wait here." She stood at the counter staring at me for 50 minutes while I helped other customers. When it was finally ready, she snatched it and said, "Took you long enough?" My brother works at an electronics store, and a Karen brought back a laptop she bought 2 years ago. She said, "It's broken." He asked what was wrong. She said, "It's slow." He asked if she'd run any updates or maintenance. She said, "I shouldn't have to. It should just work." He explained that computers need regular maintenance. She said, "That's not my responsibility." He asked if it was still under warranty. She said no. He offered to run diagnostics for a fee. She said, "You're going to charge me to fix your defective product." He said, "It's 2 years old." She said, "It should last forever." He told her technology doesn't work that way. She said, "In my day, things were built to last." He said, "This is still working, it just needs maintenance." She said, "I want a refund." He said, "It's been 2 years." She demanded to speak to corporate. He gave her the number. She called them right there in the store on speakerphone. They told her the same thing. She said everyone was ganging up on her and left threatening legal action. I work at a gym, and a Karen signed up for a membership with a 12-month contract. 3 months in, she tried to cancel. I told her about the cancellation fee. She said, "That's illegal." I showed her the contract she signed. She said, "I didn't read that." I said, "You signed it." She said, "Under duress." I asked what duress. She said, "The salesperson was pressuring me." I told her she could still cancel with the fee. She refused to pay it. She said, "I'll just stop paying." I explained that would go to collections. She said, "You can't do that." I said, "It's in the contract." She said, "I'm reporting you to the Better Business Bureau." I said, "That's your right." She said, "You'll regret this," and stormed out. She kept coming to the gym for another month using her active membership, then disputed the charges with her credit card company. We sent them the signed contract. She lost the dispute. She left a review saying we scammed her. I work at a movie theatre, and a Karen bought tickets for the wrong showtime. She showed up an hour late and tried to enter. I told her the movie already started. She said, "So?" I said, "You can't go in an hour late." She said, "Why not?" I said, "You missed most of the movie." She said, "That's my choice." I told her she could exchange for a later showing. She said, "I'm here now." I explained our policy. She said, "That's a stupid policy." I offered a refund. She said, "I don't want a refund. I want to see this movie right now." I told her the next showing was in 2 hours. She said, "I'm not waiting 2 hours." I said those were her options. She said, "You're ruining my night." I said, "You bought the wrong tickets." She said, "That's your website's fault for being confusing." I pulled up the confirmation email showing she selected that time. She said, "I was hacked," and demanded free tickets. We didn't give them to her. She sat in the lobby on her phone, loudly talking about how terrible our customer service was, until security asked her to leave. My sister works at a nail salon, and a Karen came in without an appointment demanding a full set. My sister told her they were fully booked. Karen said, "I'll wait." My sister said, "The wait would be 3 hours." Karen said, "That's fine." My sister said, "We close in 2 hours." Karen said, "Stay open late." My sister said they couldn't. Karen said, "Why not?" My sister said, "We have lives outside of work." Karen said, "That's not my problem." My sister offered to book her for the next day. Karen said, "I have an event tonight." My sister said, "You should have called ahead." Karen said, "I shouldn't have to plan everything." My sister apologized but said there was nothing they could do. Karen said, This is the worst service I've ever experienced. Even though she literally just walked in, she demanded the owner's number. My sister gave it to her. The owner backed up my sister. Karen posted on every review site that the salon discriminates against walk-ins. I work at a car rental agency, and a Karen rented a car for a week. She returned it with an empty tank. I told her there was a refueling fee. She said, "I'm not paying that." I said, "You signed an agreement to return it with a full tank." She said, "I forgot." I said, "That's why there's a fee." She said, "How much?" I told her. She said, "That's more than gas costs." I explained it includes a service fee. She said, "That's a scam." I said, "You can dispute it with corporate." She said, "I want you to waive it right now." I said, "I don't have that authority." She said, "Get someone who does." My manager came out and said the same thing. Karen said, "This is theft." My manager said, "It's in your contract." Karen said, "Contracts should be negotiable." My manager said, "Not after you've already used the service." Karen paid the fee while muttering about calling her lawyer. She never called. My friend works at a bank, and a Karen came in to dispute a charge on her account. My friend looked it up. It was a legitimate purchase Karen made herself. My friend showed her the receipt. Karen said, "I didn't authorize that." My friend said, "It has your signature." Karen said, "That's not my signature." My friend compared it to her signature on file. It matched. Karen said, "Someone forged it." My friend asked if she wanted to file a police report for fraud. Karen said, "No." My friend asked why not if it was fraud. Karen said, "I just want my money back." My friend explained she couldn't reverse a legitimate charge. Karen said, "But I don't remember making it." My friend said, "That doesn't make it fraudulent." Karen said, "This is why I'm switching banks," and closed her account. She opened an account at a different bank and tried the same thing there. They told her the same thing. I work at a vet clinic, and a Karen brought in her dog for a checkup. The vet said the dog needed vaccines. Karen said, "I don't believe in vaccines." The vet said, "They protect against serious diseases." Karen said, "Big pharma propaganda." The vet tried to explain the science. Karen said, "I did my own research." The vet asked where. Karen said, "Facebook." The vet said, "That's not reliable." Karen said, "It's more reliable than you." The vet said, "I went to veterinary school." Karen said, "School is indoctrination." The vet asked why she brought her dog in. Karen said, "For a checkup, not a sales pitch." The vet said without vaccines the dog was at risk. Karen said, "We'll take our chances," and left. She posted online that the vet tried to poison her dog. I work at a bookstore, and a Karen asked me to recommend a book. I suggested a bestseller. She said, "I've heard of that one." I said, "It's very popular." She said, "I don't read popular books." I asked what genre she liked. She said, "Something good." I asked her to be more specific. She said, "Just give me something good." I suggested 3 different books. She said no to all of them. I asked what she'd enjoyed in the past. She said, "I don't remember titles." I asked for authors. She said, "I don't remember names." I asked for plots. She said, "Just something that's not boring." I suggested she browse. She said, "I don't have time to browse." I offered to order something online for her. She said, "I'm here now." I told her I'd given her all my suggestions. She said, "You're not very helpful," and left without buying anything. She left a review saying our staff doesn't know books. My cousin works at a clothing store, and a Karen tried on a dress that was clearly too small. She came out of the fitting room and said, "This is mislabeled." My cousin asked what she meant. Karen said, "This says medium, but it's obviously a small." My cousin said, "It might just run small." Karen said, "Or it's mislabeled." My cousin offered to get her a large. Karen said, "I'm not a large." My cousin said, "Just to see if it fits better." Karen said, I'm a medium, my cousin said. Sizes vary by brand, Karen said. I know my size. My cousin said, would you like to try the large? Karen said, this is insulting. My cousin apologized. Karen said, you're implying I'm fat. My cousin said, I'm trying to help you find something that fits. Karen said, by calling me fat. My cousin gave up. Karen bought nothing and wrote a review saying the staff body shames customers. I work at a home improvement store and a Karen came in asking for help with a project. I asked what she needed. She said, I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. I said, what are you trying to build? She said, something for my house. I asked what room. She said, does it matter? I said, it helps me narrow down options. She said, just show me everything. I explained we have thousands of products. She said, I don't have all day. I asked if she had a picture or drawing. She said no. I asked if she could describe it. She said, if I could describe it, I wouldn't need your help. I suggested she come back with more details. She said, this is your job. I said, I need some information to help you. She said, forget it, and left. She called the store later to complain that I refused to help her. My friend works at a post office, and a Karen tried to mail a package without enough postage. My friend told her she needed 2 more stamps. Karen said, I already put stamps on it. My friend said, it's overweight. Karen said, by how much? My friend said, £0.50. Karen said, that's nothing. My friend said, it still needs more postage. Karen said, this is a scam. My friend showed her the postal rate chart. Karen said, I'm not paying more. My friend said, then we can't mail it. Karen said, I'll just put it in the box outside. My friend said, it'll get returned. Karen said, we'll see about that, and took her package. She put it in the outgoing mail slot. It came back 2 days later, marked insufficient postage. Karen came back in furious, claiming my friend sabotaged her package. I work at a pet store, and a Karen came in with a fish in a bag. She said, this fish died. I asked when she bought it. She said, 6 months ago. I said, our guarantee is 30 days. She said, but it died. I said, fish don't live forever. She said, this one should have. I asked what kind of tank she had. She said, a bowl. I said, fish need filtered tanks. She said, that's not what the internet said. I asked what website. She couldn't remember. I explained proper fish care. She said, you should have told me that when I bought it. I said, we have care sheets at checkout. She said, I didn't see them. I showed her the display. She said, those are too small to read. I offered to help her set up a proper tank. She said, I just want a refund. I said, we can't refund a 6-month-old fish. She said, why not? I said, that's not how it works. She said, you sold me a defective fish. I said, the fish was fine. The care wasn't. She demanded corporate's number. I gave it to her. She never called. My brother works at an amusement park, and a Karen was told she couldn't bring outside food in. She said, it's for my son. The employee said, we have food inside. Karen said, your food is overpriced. The employee said, those are the rules. Karen said, I have special dietary needs. The employee asked if she had documentation. She said, I don't need documentation. The employee said, then you can't bring it in. Karen said, this is discrimination. The employee said, against what? Karen said, against people who pack lunches. The employee offered to hold her food at guest services. Karen said, so you can steal it? The employee said, we're trying to accommodate you. Karen said, by stealing my food. She demanded a manager. The manager said the same thing. Karen said, I'm never coming back here, and got a refund. She was back the following weekend and tried to sneak food in again. I work at a dry cleaner and a Karen dropped off a white shirt with a huge red wine stain. I told her we'd try, but it might not come out completely. She said, "What do you mean might not?" I said, "Red wine is difficult." She said, "That's your job." I said, "We'll do our best." She said, "Your best better be perfect." I took the shirt. We got about 80% of the stain out. When she picked it up, she said, "There's still a stain." I said, "We warned you." She said, "I didn't think you were serious." I said, "Red wine is one of the hardest stains." She said, "Then why did you accept it?" I said, "Because you asked us to try." She said, "Try means succeed." I said, "We did our best." She said, "Your best isn't good enough." She demanded we pay for a new shirt. I said no. She said, "You ruined it." I said, "It was already ruined when you brought it in." She said, "I want compensation." We gave her the cleaning for free. She still left a bad review. I work at a hardware store, and a Karen asked me where the light bulbs were. I pointed to aisle 7. She said, "Can you show me?" I walked her to the aisle. She said, "Which ones do I need?" I asked what fixture. She said, "A lamp." I asked what kind of lamp. She said, "A regular one." I showed her standard bulbs. She said, "How do I know which one?" I asked what wattage her old bulb was. She said, "I threw it away." I suggested she bring in the lamp. She said, "I'm here now." I told her most lamps use 60-watt equivalent. She said, "What if I get the wrong one?" I said, "Bring the receipt and you can exchange it." She said, "That's too much work." I said, "Then take a picture of your lamp and I can help." She said, "I didn't think to do that." I suggested she guess. She said, "What if I'm wrong?" I said, "Then exchange it." She left without buying anything and called to complain that I didn't help her. My sister works at a salon and a Karen came in demanding highlights. My sister asked what color. Karen said, "Whatever looks good." My sister showed her a color chart. Karen said, "You pick." My sister suggested a few options. Karen said no to all of them. My sister asked what she wanted. Karen said, "I don't know." My sister said, "I need some direction." Karen said, "That's why I'm paying you." My sister tried 3 more suggestions. Karen rejected them all. My sister asked if she had a reference photo. Karen said no. My sister asked what she didn't like about her current color. Karen said, "It's boring." My sister suggested subtle highlights. Karen said, "That's boring too." My sister said, "I'm not sure what you want." Karen said, "Neither am I. But I'll know it when I see it." My sister refused to start without a clear plan. Karen left and wrote a review saying my sister was difficult and unprofessional. Alright, that wraps it up. If you enjoyed these American Karen stories, make sure you're subscribed and I'll catch you in the next one.